because if I said yes, or if I said I was going to do something, I delivered on it. So it became, well, you can trust him, Diamond Geezer, he gets it done. Because we've moved so much into online, and we're so one-to-one communication is so frowned upon that those skills have been lost. I'm sure there was probably a bit of a sneaking grin coming across my face that went, I'm a diamond dealer.
Geoff Smith is a diamond geezer. No, seriously, he is a diamond geezer. He traded in diamonds. When I saw Geoff speak at an event, I just needed to have him on this podcast. When you hear Geoff's story, you will be on the edge of your seat. Like, how do you approach losing £1 million worth of other people's money? Especially when those people really want their money back, and they will go to quite extreme lengths to get that money back. How do you negotiate with these sort of people? And when you're at the top of the game and you're in the security industry, an industry which has some pretty tough people in it, and all that is going on around you, how do you navigate your way through that? Geoff is a diamond geezer, and you're going to want to listen to this story to the very end and hear how he went to the top of his game in the security industry, moved and started dealing with importing diamonds from other countries, and then recovering from losing £1 million worth of other people's money. I'm Richard Osborne. This is Drive, the small business podcast from UKBF. Hiya, Geoff. Good to see you.
Good to be here, Richard.
I've seen you speak, and when we saw you on stage at the Business Networking show, and you was talking about your journey, my colleague Jacob was sat next to me, and his face was just like totally transfixed. And I remember sitting there thinking at the time, like, we need to speak to this guy. We really need to share this guy's story on this podcast. So having you here, absolutely fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to sort of hearing that story and really getting sort of like into the detail of it. So really, like, how do you start? How do you grow up?
Well, thanks for having me on the show, first of all, Richard. It's great to come and actually have a chat with you guys and to further the experiences that you guys had at TBNS, which was a great platform to get the story out on. My background story is probably not as exciting as where things ended up. So I grew up in West London, normal family life. So loving parents, one brother. No prison visits to visit the family at the weekend. So it was all very normal, very much middle class suburbia. And my journey into being an entrepreneur in the first place sort of started at a pretty early age, where I went out and developed a car cleaning business with a friend of mine from school. And that was my journey into entrepreneurialism. That was where it all stemmed from. I'd seen Wall Street on the TV. I'd seen Gordon Gekko doing his thing with his braces and his stripy shirts, and that was where I wanted to go. The idea of the money, the power, was quite intoxicating for a 10, 11, 12-year-old, and I decided at that point I wanted to get out and follow that route for myself.
So I think that's quite a valuable trait to have, though, and something which quite often when you're chatting to people who have gone on and run their own businesses, is they've had that. It doesn't just suddenly then happen through their childhood, their younger years. They want to make their own money. They want to go and do their own thing. So you just mentioned sort of like 10, 11, 12. So is that the age group where literally you and a mate, bucket and sponge, going on, knocking on doors, putting leaflets together through people's...
Absolutely, yeah. It was... We used a really frowned upon sales technique, which is called knock on people's doors and ask. Now you're supposed to do a TikTok dance and send an email, and someone will moan about you on LinkedIn for contacting them and daring to talk about your business. But no, we very much decided that we would that we would go out, bang on doors and go and see what we could get, because we wanted to go and earn money, we wanted to go and do our own thing. I would also add to that, I need to have a bit of a nod to my dad in that one, because I didn't own car cleaning stuff at that time, so I had to steal it from his garage. So he sponsored a lot of that early endeavour.
He was an early investor.
He was, yeah. I've gone back to him many times since for different projects. He seems to have learnt one of my lessons, which is knowing when to say no. So we evolved from the early days of out on a push bike Saturday morning, going around sort of the more affluent areas where we were to get clients by knocking on doors, and that was what we did.
And from there, because obviously during that time you was in school, what did you want to be? What was your career aspiration? What industry do you want to get into?
Originally, I wanted to be a stockbroker.
So it really was Wall Street.
It really was Wall Street, yeah. And I remember vividly having a conversation with my form tutor at school, and we were talking about careers. And he said to me, he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I want to be a stockbroker." And he sort of laughed. It's more like road digger. That would be more your level. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll store that one for when I see you in a few years' time. So he was actually quite inspirational in furthering my entrepreneurial wants, because it was a little bit of I can prove you wrong, and I will. So it's interesting, the people you meet on the journey and the influences they can have, even when they're trying to be a little bit negative. You can turn that to fuel where you want to go.
That is interesting there. So, because when you think about a career advisor, you go into your school, your college. We're a similar age, so our careers advice is probably not too dissimilar. You go into for me, it's head of year's office, sit down. They say we want to be, all right. They chuck you a couple of leaflets or something, and that's it. You're done in like 2 minutes. Imagine yours wasn't too dissimilar from that, but this is the person that's meant to point you in the right direction of what you want your career to be. Knowing where this journey is going and thinking about how that person just dismissed what you wanted to be at that point, at the careers advisor at your school, how things may have been different if they had actually supported what your aspiration, your dream of wanting to be a stockbroker would have been then.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's very easy to be, dismissive, and I get at the time, we were all at school. He's got 30 of us sat in his room. Half of the people are throwing paper aeroplanes. We were looking out the window, and I guess it's quite easy to become dismissive when you've just got a lot of people coming at you with things that you think are unachievable, and I think that is a problem with some of our systems, is that people will just fob you off for an easy life. So it's much easier, rather than actually taking somebody and going, right, let's run with that. Let's see how I can help you. Let's see where I can go. It's much easier just to go, well, you'll find some magazines over there. Just go and take a few, and we'll catch up in 6 months' time when you filled your forms in. And that seemed to be, back in certainly my experience of schools and careers, that was pretty much what we did. We had a careers library, which was one room with various different brochures on join the army, be an architect, join the nursing profession. Not an awful lot in between, really, and that was your guidance. That was what you had to deal with. So there certainly wasn't a lot. If you wanted to go and aspire to be something in business, something a bit different, get into trading, something a bit entrepreneurial, that support network, as far as I was concerned, was not there and not available.
No. So obviously they dismissed you, and you just said yourself there that sort of fueled you, sort of like, right, I'm going to show them. Things don't happen overnight, though. So what you got through there, left. What was your first job? What was your first step?
Well, I did various different things when I was working through. So obviously my early stages was out on the Saturday and washing the cars and everything else. And I learned a lot from that. Actually, I learned a lot of consistency. Actually turning up, getting the stuff, being reliable, coming back time after time. And that's where my early sort of entrepreneurial lessons were formed. Really, is where I learned. And where I had my first successful exit as well, having sold out the round for some girly mags and a few £100 to one of the sixth formers. So yeah, it's a successful exit. I'm going to take it. So, and then after that, I went on. Obviously, I was growing up.
Sorry, just going to pause you there. So you sold your first business.
I did. Yeah, I sold my.
So let's talk about that negotiation.
Well, it was quite an interesting one. I won't name names. I'll call Trevor because his name was Trevor, and he was a sixth former at our school. And obviously, I was being one of the bigger guys at our schools. By this time, I was already involved in weight training, rugby, and various different martial arts and stuff. So the older kids in the school knew who I was. And they also knew some of the stuff that we did because we generally had some money in our pocket, could do a few bits and pieces. And one of the guys came and expressed a bit of an interest. What do you do? How do you do it? I told him what we were doing and the fact that we had a round there. And he was in a position where he was doing his A-levels. His parents were on his back to get a job. He didn't want to go and work in the Tesco's coffee shop, which was the most lucrative, next best thing for us all at that stage. And he asked if he could get involved. But by this time, I'd become a bit disillusioned with going out every Saturday and trying to do the stuff. And my vision of being an entrepreneur is, my association with the meaning of it is if you've got a business that you've set up, does the money still turn up even if you don't? Because if it doesn't, you've bought a job. So, and at that point, I knew I'd bought a job, so I didn't want to do it anymore. So we had a chat in the sixth form common room, and we agreed terms, and it was a cash deal with to be paid immediately, and then clients transferred across, and then he chucked in a couple of sweeteners for us as well. There's some artistic magazines, and that was the first deal, and that was how it was done. It was as easy as that, and then he took it over, and I think he did continue to run it for a few years. So
we're making light of it and joking, but I do find it fascinating to listen to that as an individual you had that mindset whilst you're still at like sixth form, high school, that sort of age, because if I think back to my 20s, I remember a director, he's the ops director of a company I used to work for, and just generally in part of his little mentoring, coaching, as I was like the young lad coming up there, he turned around to me and said, a business owner, an entrepreneur, never really makes their money until they sell their business. That was just his approach. And I learnt that later on. But you're already thinking in that sort of mindset, beyond the jest that we're having of like what it was. It's still that very mindset, as you just said. Does the money come in even if you're off sick or unable to work? Which I think's just a fascinating insight into where your mind already was at that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was always going to be going out to earn my own money, but in as much as the whole of that journey encouraged me to be working hard and going out and putting the hours in to get the rewards. And my whole life growing up, my lead from my parents was, if you work hard, you can get what you want. It takes time, but you'll get there. My whole issue, the whole word I didn't like, was time. I didn't like being told it's going to take years for you to get to where you want to go, because I think that there is a way you can get to where you want to go. It's just how you join up the steps. And I was very much of that mindset, and I never saw Gordon Gekko waiting for his money. He always went and got it. And that's what drove me as I was putting these things together. So when I was starting the business, I was always mindful of where it was going to end up. If I step into something, I like to know how I'm going to step out of it. And that helped me immensely in later years of knowing which door to get out of.
So jesting again, but obviously you sold your first business with a cash deal in that sense.
Yeah.
You finished high school. You went into what some might say proper jobs or that sort of it. What was your sector at that point? What was your trade at that point?
So when I left college after A-levels, I went into something that really I never intended to. I was actually being recruited to join the police, and I had passed all of the qualifications, all of the entry requirements. I'd had the interviews, and I had a start date, and I was due to be starting with them. And then, so at that point, I was not too bothered about going to uni. Wasn't really feeling it. I was going off into the real world. I was going to go and do something, and then something came out of left field that derailed the police application, and I had to go and get a proper job.
Right.
So then I found myself out in the world thinking, well, what am I going to do? And I got involved in the insurance industry, and I was the man at the pearl. So for anybody under the age of 40 who's got no idea what that is, probably ask your parents. But I used to basically do knocking on doors, in as much as going around to people's houses and selling them home insurance and car insurance in their houses. And that was how I then got involved in financial services.
I remember that, literally people coming along, knocking on your doors. You alluded to it earlier, so it's really frowned upon, but that is how business was done domestically during that time. It was going through, knocking on doors, and it was a tough old gig, whether you were selling a vacuum hoover or insurance or was it the pools?
Pools coupons.
Pools coupons. That it was, but it's a good confidence builder.
I think you learn a lot. You learn how to talk to people, and that's the thing. You see massive investment from people now trying to deliver sales training in their companies for their online services and their TikTok dances and everything else. But what they lose is the ability for their staff and the people involved in their business to actually communicate one-to-one in a persuasive manner. They lose that because we've moved so much into online, and we're so one-to-one communication is so frowned upon that those skills have been lost, which is why now those companies are having to reinvest in getting people to come back in and educate their staff how to actually do it. Whereas we just learned it on the street. we learned,
and you learn a lot of resilience as well, because for every 20 doors you may knock on, you're lucky if you get one to turn around and go, oh, I was just thinking about my insurance.
Absolutely, yeah. It's not the first thing that comes up when you're trying to get the kids' tea ready and someone's knocking on the door to talk about your house insurance. But that was how we did it. We had ambitious targets, and big businesses were built off the back of that. Some huge household names built their legacy on knocking on people's doors.
Yeah. So how did that career develop?
Interestingly, so I stayed in the insurance for a number of years, and I got involved in corporate marketing within that. It was around the advent of stakeholder pensions when they came out for the first time, wonders that they were. And I was involved in selling those to businesses. And part of that was doing stage presentations to companies for all of their employees and fielding questions from them, and then getting them to sign up to pension schemes en masse, which was it was a great experience. And again, massive on the confidence building and the communication skills when you're stood in front of a building firm of 400 or 500 guys who have been pulled in off site to sit and listen to you, none of whom want to be there because you're talking about taking some of their pay away and putting it into something they can have in 30 years' time. So it was a real steep learning curve. It was a really good time.
Yeah. So I'm picturing this person in my mind now who's a bit of a go-getter, wanting to make their own money from a very early age, take control of their destiny in that sense. The selling insurance, a very very suit and sort of formal type of industry sector, going a bit, again, door knocking, very, well presented, good communicator, sounding like very, sort of sensible person to be sort of, to have within your organisation, be working with, moving into the corporate world, and selling pensions, a very sensible, very formal, legal kind of industry, really. So you're in that role, you're selling pensions. So what sort of happened next? You had a bit of a career change.
Well, yeah,
don't you?
absolutely. Well, running alongside all of these things in the background, as I said earlier, I'd been, when I was at school and at college, I was very much into the gym and the weight training and the martial arts and the rugby and everything else. And part of that journey had seen me sort of running a gym in my spare time. And particularly when you're in the gym during the daytime, it tends to be a lot of guys who work in the security industry. And they're in there sort of 10 o'clock in the morning when everyone else is already at work because they've been up late, and they go in and they spend the day there training and eating and swapping tips on what steroids to use and this sort of thing. And obviously that became part of my world, and because I was there and I was connected to these people, it wasn't too long before one of them came along and said, listen, bit of a bigger guy, look all right in a jacket, we've got some work on Saturday, we're a bit short, can you come and help us out? And that was my first foray into the security world. I was working in pubs and nightclubs, and eventually going on to some executive protection and various different bits and pieces before I developed my own security business in years to come. I was running that alongside my sensible day job.
So you're literally such different kind of roles when you say you literally alongside. So at that point, whilst you're selling insurance and selling pensions, you're often dressed on door at nights, bouncer, door security for presumably nightclubs, casinos, anything like that.
Yeah.
It's, on a serious level, I imagine the communication skills you developed and learned throughout your day job enabled you to diffuse situations and have conversations with people without having to resort to physical restraint.
Well, I can't say that it was always like that.
No.
But I did manage to talk my way out of more problems than I had to physically fight my way out of which, in that industry, it's inevitable that there's going to be a few of those altercations as well. But again, within that whole process, I was running this job very much alongside my other stuff, and it was all about, really for me, it was about putting money in the bank to be able to do other things at that time, because I wasn't really overly enamoured with having sort of the day job that I had. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. The security was good. It was good fun. I was meeting interesting people. I was earning money while most people were spending it. But I was back to having to have that work ethic again, because I was working 5 days a week with my insurance job. Sometimes I was working 6 nights a week, and occasionally I was doing other bits and pieces at the weekends as well. So I became almost a workaholic at that point, because I was running 2 and 3 jobs at the same time, but a bit aimlessly, with not really knowing exactly where I wanted to end up at that point.
So when did the light switch go that inspired you and give you that direction? When did you get that focus?
Well, it was a couple of years into it, when I was working for a bank by this time. I'd moved across to work for one of the high street banks doing wealth management. And I had a bit of a disagreement with one of the area managers of that bank, who was, suggesting that I should be pushing products harder to people that I thought shouldn't be having them pushed on them. And so we had a bit of a disagreement, and he left my office promptly through the door horizontally. At that point, I thought I'd made my point, and that would be the end of it. But he made his point quite succinctly in a letter on the Monday morning, which said, "Go and never darken our doors again." So fair to say that he won that encounter. And so now I was jobless. So now I was sitting there. Obviously, I still had my security work, which I'd done all of the time. I was sitting there now on my sort of impromptu vacation and thinking, what do I want to do? And again, I've always had that thing. I want to work for myself. I want to do my own thing. I want to earn my own money. And now I'm thinking, we go with what we know, and what we knew at that point was security. and I knew it well because I've been doing it for a long time and I had a lot of good contacts in there. But what I was going to have to do now was going to be slightly different, because if I wanted to do this as an entrepreneur and I wanted to do this as my business, I was now going to have to start going head to head with people that had been allies of mine in the first place, and that could be quite tricky.
Right. Presumably, because of the very nature of the industry it is, people don't normally deal through cease and desist letters or something along those lines.
No, it was one of those things when I moved across to do it, and I decided that I was going to go my own way, and I was going to set up my own security business and start taking contracts. But I had to be a bit mindful about how I would want to do it, because I liken the big companies in the security industry to crocodiles, really. If you put your head in their mouth, it's going to get bitten off. So I had to come up with a way that I could not get my head bitten off, because you start going after people's contracts, you're likely to get 3 or 4 guys turn up round your house at 3 o'clock in the morning with balaclavas on, and it's pretty fair to say they're not there to invite you to a ski trip. so that's not going to happen. So I had to try and find a way that I could continue to work, continue to be allied with these companies. And so I sort of decided, and again, using the crocodile analogy, everything that sticks its head in the mouth of the crocodile gets it bitten off, apart from the little bird that flips in and cleans its teeth. So I decided to come up with a methodology that would allow me to do exactly that for the bigger companies, by taking on the worst places that they didn't really want, or the places that were difficult to staff, or the places where they were having issues that was just taking their eye off the ball, or not really financially worth their while because they were so big, but could be worth my while as a smaller operator. And that was how I set out. That was my USP. That was I decided I would go in under the radar, in a supportive function, and be non-threatening to those guys. So I wasn't directly challenging them head to head, but more working aligned with them. So trying to work a bit smart, as opposed to just going straight into a confrontation situation, which I would definitely have lost at that time.
And I'm presuming that worked well and put you in good stead?
Yeah, it worked well for a good period of time, and it was fair to say that we had a good relationship with the companies that we worked for. The guys that I employed were fantastic, really good guys. The fact that we took on places that were slightly harder to deal with, or a bit problematic, meant we were able to charge a bit more money for doing that, which meant I could pay better rates. So I was able to attract the guys that wanted to work for more money, and I was able to go and the security industry that time was about having the biggest, scariest people available that would get the job done for you. So I was able to recruit those kind of guys because I was able to pay more money. So it was a good self-fulfilling circle, really. I was able to charge more, therefore I had better guys, therefore I got more work.
And then your business grew and grew during that time, and you went into private security?
Yeah, we did lots of different bits of private security. Obviously, we were still servicing the pubs and the nightclubs. We started doing some executive protection stuff. We did private weddings for people. We did some interesting weddings where there had been estranged spouses from previous relationships trying to turn up and having to secure the sites to stop people trying to gate crash the weddings, which was interesting. One of the best, most interesting jobs we did was a diamond exhibition, and that may have prompted me to think about things further down the track. But we looked after a jewellers that was having a big diamond exhibition for their clients, and we did the private security for that. So some interesting jobs came out of it over the time we were in there.
And the thing with private security, or that sort of sector, is you get to meet some really interesting characters.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that over time I met quite a lot of interesting characters, some more interesting than others, and some of the people that I met on that journey, who I'm not going to mention on your podcast, may have sort of shaped the way that some of the outcomes of my business journey at that stage went, there've been various sort of films, and yeah, I was talking to a guy the other day who was listening to my story, and he was, well, you know, if Guy Ritchie did business, he'd be talking about your stuff, and that was kind of how it evolved. Was, you know, that sort of world I was in contact with, so I began to get pulled into circles of what we would loosely refer to as business people. Who thought it was quite useful to have, you know, a young cocky guy with a, you know, fairly robust private army at his disposal, wrapped around them. So I've met some very interesting people during that time.
What was that lifestyle like at that time?
Well, at that time it became really good. But the problem is you start believing your own hype. So I was young. It was a lot of cash involved in the business. We had, you know, a big group of people around us who, you know, were looking out for my interests wherever, and it became nightclubs, VIP parties, exotic weekends away, you know, champagne bottles with sparklers on, and the parties behind the private curtains everywhere. And it became a bit of a social world. And the problem being that once you get into that, it's very easy to start getting the taste for that. And it starts to run ahead of you. And I was doing that all the time. And there was a couple of times where we were going out partying or involved on nights out. And one of the bars that we used to look after, I used to get on very well with the guys who ran it. So we'd been drinking in the bar that night, we'd had a lock-in there, some people had stayed, then we'd gone to a club afterwards. And the following week I went in to pick up the wages for the security who worked at that bar, because they were my guys as well. And we sat down and he said, oh, so we need to sort out the money from last week. I said, oh yeah, that'd be great. He said, we need to talk about the bar tab as well. I said, yeah. I said, well, let's just sort out what the wages are, and then we'll sort out the difference between us. And he said, I'm glad you said that. He said, I thought that would probably be the best way of doing it. So at this point, the penny hasn't dropped. I'm expecting him to give me some money, and I'm expecting him to knock some off. And he just gave me a bill for $3,500. So we'd gone out for the weekend, gone out on the night, wasted the entire week's wages for the staff that had been working there, and now owed him money for being there as well. And it was at that point, really, for me, the penny dropped that at some point social and business has got to separate, and you cannot have the two together because it doesn't work. And that was quite an expensive lesson.
So when you're living this lifestyle, so I really am like picturing like a movie scene, like Guy Ritchie almost, like in my head here, of glamour, glitz, note 50s flying everywhere in these sort of private bars sort of thing with heavies around, you know, like you can't speak to him sort of thing going on, and like just like cash flowing out pockets and sort of thing, and mixing with some sort of high profile people that you might see in the media or not, sort of thing.
Yeah, it was very much like that. It was very much like that. And, you know, unfortunately, you soon realise when you're trying to live that lifestyle that you do need to have an abundant amount of 50s that are going to fly out of your pocket. And that becomes difficult to keep up with. And you are then moving in circles where there are, you know, VIPs or celebrities around it. And you learn very quickly on that circle when you're trying to keep up with them that most of the stuff they get's complimentary. And yours isn't.
No.
But so it is very much like that, and it becomes a different world. And what happens when you get into that world is your mindset changes, and you start to believe things are normal and that's your normal life, when actually it's a long way divorced from what normal life is really like. And so it very much, the people that you're putting around you and the things that you do and the things you start accepting as being normal, your perspective really gets skewed. So
when you're living in that lifestyle, you, as you say, you believed your own hype at that sort of time and what was going on. Like, imagine it being very intoxicating in itself anyway. The penny's just dropped at a point where you've just gone to expecting to pick up money and actually being given a bill because to maintaining that lifestyle. I don't know whether I'm reading a point in time here, but what was the journey, or how did it happen that you come to, I'm going to use diversify your business?
Well, what happened during this diversification process was I got a phone call one day out of the blue from a guy. I knew who the guy was, and again, no names. So, listen, you've been on my radar for a little while. Like to talk to you about a bit of business. I think will be a good fit for you, good fit for us. Need you to come down to have a meeting tomorrow, 2:00. Get yourself there. It wasn't a case of he waited for me to say yes. By the time he'd said get yourself there, the phone had already gone down, and I was like, okay.
And this was somebody that they're not asking.
Yeah, this was there are certain people and certain industries and particularly connected around what we were doing where sometimes it's better just to go, okay. What I had begun to realise is that, despite the fact that I had I describe as a few big units around me who were quite handy when push comes to shove. That old adage of there's always somebody bigger around the corner. I was already sort of thinking of myself as a big fish, but what I didn't realise was at that point I hadn't really got out of the spawning pond, let alone into the pond. And there were some pretty big fish in the dark depths of that pond that would have been seriously detrimental to a small fish like me. So it was one of those phone calls. It was like, this is a meeting. You're going to be there. You're not going to say no. See you at 2:00, and that was set up, and that was the start of my journey on a path that would dictate the next period of my life.
So how'd that meeting go?
Well, I turned up in what I later described as the diamond trading capital of the world, which was Bracknell, and I walked into a pub just down in the town centre, and 2 or 3 guys came in to talk to me about what this business proposition was. And the business proposition was basically, I've got somebody who can get us diamond purchasing licenses in Sierra Leone, and we can set up a company down there where we'll be able to legally buy rough diamonds, and we can bring them into England and we can sell them in London, and we can make vast swathes of cash. And in order to do that, we want to use your money, we want to use your security, we want to use your people, and after you've finished paying for it all, you can give us 50% of whatever you make. And I thought, that sounds like a great deal. I must get involved with that.
Should we just run through the economics of that for a moment?
Yeah, exactly. So you're going to take all the risk, and when it all goes wrong, it's going to be all your fault, but you're going to pay us half anyway. And so that was the economics of the deal.
Just to work out whether there was any part of that that's in your favour, presumably 50% of the profit or 50%. So you do get all your costs covered.
We have costs covered, but you've got to front it in the first place. Yeah. Okay. And then you're going to take. So done properly, it could be. But again, to go back and quote films, diamonds. What do I know about diamonds? I don't know anything about diamonds. I'm insecurity. Until 2 nights ago, I was making my living punching people in the head, and now I'm here talking about how I'm going to ship diamonds around the world and set it up as a business entity that's going to be doing business in England with diamonds from Africa. How one day can flip everything you do on its head. It's quite surreal.
Just to cross one part off here, this was a legitimate business transaction. Correct, on the paper trail, literally. So they've got the license.
Well, I'd have to pay for the license.
Oh, you'd have to pay for
I have to buy the license.
So there is a license, a paper trail. You go out there. You buy rough cut or uncut diamonds.
Correct, yeah.
Ship them back to the UK, what, in suitcases through?
No, just carried on, and then you had to declare them at the airport when you came back, and then you pay your duties and then the VAT and whatever at customs, and then you whiz them off up into Hatton Garden as was to sell the stuff on.
Okay.
So yeah, all legitimate, but very expensive, and as we were to later find out, incredibly risky.
Okay. So presumably you thought that was a cracking deal and got involved?
Well, I'd sort of made a reputation during my time on the security of being, a man of my word, and that was actually where the Diamond Geezer moniker that I use for the speaking came around. Not actually because of my involvement in diamonds. It was because if I said yes, or if I said I was going to do something, I delivered on it. So it became, well, you can trust him, Diamond Geezer, he gets it done. So that was where it evolved from. And so I sat there for a minute and I sort of evaluated what had just been put in front of me. And part of my nature, and it always has been, is I am an inherent risk taker. I seem to quantify risk in different ways to other people. And so all of a sudden, I'm sure there was probably a bit of a sneaking grin coming across my face that went, I'm a diamond dealer. and so I went, okay, let's do it. And that was that. And that turned out to be one of the most expensive sentences I ever said.
Right. So how the first, that deal, deal went well?
Yeah, so after that I went off and did some homework, because you need to know what you're jumping into, and I didn't have a clue. I've heard all of the things and all of the big business brains like Branson saying yes and then figure out what you were going to do. So I was in to figure out what we were going to do. So I had to go off, do some research, find some people, try and get some clarity on what would happen when you turn up at Heathrow Airport with a load of diamonds. What actually is going to happen at that point? Where does it go from there? Does somebody turn up with some silver bracelets to put on you? What happens? So I did some research, and I basically had to go back to, again, I always go with what you know. Security was what I knew. So at that point, I think, right, I've got to take risk with money, risk with product, protect the money, protect the product, protect me. So I then went and assembled some security guys who had got experience in Africa, who had been ex-special forces, British military guys that we had access to through our security network, and brought them in to go and do the first trade. They jumped on the plane, went down to Sierra Leone. One of the things I hadn't accounted for is how bad communication was at that time. It was really, really difficult to be able to communicate with the guys on the ground and to be able to talk with them and find out what had gone on and what was happening.
You couldn't WhatsApp them?
No, that would be the thing of myth and fantasy at that stage, to be able to get a WhatsApp down to somebody down there. That would have been amazing. But no, it was really sort of bad communication. But over the period of time that it was there, we managed to get some funds down to them, managed to get the gist that things were moving in the right direction, and they bought some stones back to the UK, and we got them in, and after some toing and froing, a couple of hairy moments where I thought I might have a heart attack, the first deal went through, and we did quite well out of it. Yeah.
What caused the heart attack in those?
Well, I don't know if you've ever seen a rough diamond, but at this point I hadn't.
Right.
so all I knew was I had a box of what was alleged to be diamonds that had cost about £120,000, and it looked like broken bits of tarmac to me. And so I saw it. They'd sent me the pictures of what they'd actually bought, and I lost my mind. What on earth have you done? It wasn't quite that polite. And it took someone else to sort of say to me, "Look, no, listen, that's correct. It should look like that. Don't think that it comes out looking like you've got it set on your ring, because it doesn't. This is the way. This is the evolution." So once that had gone and I'd scraped myself back off the ceiling, and it went through, then trade one went through and went relatively seamlessly. we was all able to take a bit of a sigh of relief.
So you covered your costs, split the money, deal done, and got a bit of a taste for it.
Yeah, we did all of that, and I remember vividly, the night after it had all taken place, we'd sorted all the money out, and I went out for a night out with friends, and I had the cash that was left. My share of the cash was left in a bundle in the glove box of my car, which we just left in the street outside. And I had, in the region of sort of 35,000 in cash just lobbed in the glove box because we just went out and we just didn't care. That's what we did. That seemed perfectly normal and acceptable to me at the time. But so first deal went well, went as we expected it to, or as we had hoped it would. And then, at that point, pressure grew to do it again.
Okay. Pressure from yourself, pressure from external forces, a bit of both?
A bit of both, I think, because as I said, it's very easy to start believing in your own hype and getting caught up with it. And we had gone through the process of putting this trade together, and even now with the trading and stuff that I'm still involved with, it's still the thrill of the chase of putting the deal together and doing stuff that proved that you could do it. In the back of my head, I had my year 5 geography teacher going, you'll never be more than a road digger. I was well, look at me now with my bundles of cash everywhere. So there was always something driving the next one. So internally, but also externally from one or two well-placed phone calls who were going, well, time we got on with the next one then, really, isn't it? So we went again. And
a little bit of a higher risk this time, a bit more investment.
Obviously, we had to up it. We wanted to up the ante. We'd done it, and again, we upped it from the perspective of wanting to see a bigger result. At the end of the day, we were young and money driven. Our main focus, my main focus at that time, was get the money. I wasn't really too concerned how we got it. It was a question of going, right, that's what we need, let's get it. So once you've got a business model that in your head works, it's very, short of starting to bring in more people, make it bigger and expanding over time, the only way you're going to make it bigger quickly is throw money at it. And that's what we did. So we threw money into the equation. We didn't bring in anybody new. We kept the size and the scale of the team involved in it the same. But now we upped the ante and we sent a lot more money down there.
It sounds simple business logic. When you're buying stock, you buy 100 grand's worth of stock, you sell it for X amount. If you buy 200 grand's worth of stock, you're basically doubling your margin and doubling your margin again, presumably, same sort of metrics.
Similar sort of ethos, but again, it's dependent on what you're buying when you're buying rough diamonds. And we had a guy who was going down with our security guys who was an expert, probably about as expert as me, but he was an expert. So he was dictating what was getting purchased on the ground and what was going on. But each time we were sending money down there. The first time we sent down about 120,000. By the time it was all said and done, we probably yielded sort of 60,000 or so off the top of it. Second time we went down there, we decided that we were going to go bigger, and we called in the ring around the friends, family, whoever else you can get money from, and we pulled in about 500,000, which went down there this time. And that's easier said than done particularly when you don't have a bank account in Sierra Leone to try and get that down there.
So you're travelling down there with basically £500,000 worth of cash.
Well, there was a lot of that, and also because of again limits of things like cash you can actually physically carry. We were also having to avail the services of multiple Western Unions and MoneyGrams just to physically get the cash into the country. And
I've got a mental image now of Wolf of Wall Street where they're taping the money around their waist.
It was a bit like that. So, there were certain MoneyGrams and certain Western Unions around the sort of the West London area that must have just kept wondering why they had like these big queues of goons outside their shops all the time, turning up with individual packets of £4,000 and £5,000 to send one after the other. It was a little bit of a mission. But the second time we went down there, obviously we had to go bigger to make it worthwhile, and because we were really proving we'd arrived now. We were the next big thing. So
you're making good money, and then you just decided we're going big.
Yeah, go big or go home.
Yeah.
So we'd executed deal 2. Deal 3 came along, and what we didn't realise is that after deal 1 had gone down, and we had got into the throes, that there were people, many thousands of miles away who were already colluding on what our downfall was going to be. So we executed deal 2, which was great. Deal 3, well, we're cocky now. I was already cocky. I didn't need much help. So now I'm really cocky because we've done it twice and we've done it with no issues. I've got the best security guys. Everything is going swimmingly well. So this time around, we're going to go really big. So again, calls into business people who might want to invest. Friends,
these aren't
family.
your bank manager business people.
No, these are not the typical bank manager business people. I said there's something strangely disconcerting about the sort of guy who turns up in your office with 50 grand or 100 grand in a holdall, and despite all the risks you've explained to him, just puts it on the table, gives it a little pat like you're giving this back to me whether you like it or not, and then leaves. So some of those types of business people. Friends, family, and then because we were greedy and cocky, and we decided, right, well, this only takes a week for this to go through. So we've got money that we put aside from the security business for the VAT. We've got money we put aside for the payroll, but back in a week. So we'll use all of it, and so we upped the ante to get as much money down there as we possibly could.
Hey, this is your money at this point.
This is not all my money. Unfortunately, it would have made life much easier if I was. So this is money that we've pulled in from my own businesses, and then also from people around us who have been able to put cash up to enable us to do this, and to make sure that we've got enough to go down there and get the kind of return that we want.
So how much are we talking?
We're up to the £1 million mark at this time. So
Okay.
so that's where we were at. And then we go from there. So the money is down there, the team are down there.
You're Western Unioning and
The
you're
Western
carrying cash
Union,
and
cash
£1 million
carrying.
worth of cash.
Yes, yeah. As you do. That
okay.
was fairly normal in those days for all of us. So we sent the money down there. We sent the team down there. We sent the guys down there to go and buy us our next big payday, and to bring it back home for us.
Cool. How'd that go?
Badly. It went very, very, very badly. What became apparent when the guys came back, I was sat in my office, because I'd stopped having to insist on being at all of these meetings when they're having, because it was just going to be easy. So I was sat in my office, and a phone call came through from the guy who used to run my security for me, and he basically said, are you sitting down? And I could tell, this was a guy who has been around the world, special forces. There was not much phased this guy, And you talked to him, and he was just a lovely, nice guy. But there was now an edge to his voice that I hadn't heard. And he was just like, are you sitting down? I was like, what's happened? He said, we've just got into the garden. We've unsealed the package, and I said, okay, yeah, great. What's it look like? What's the problem? He said, well, I don't know quite how to tell you this. He said, but we've got a box full of broken glass. And I went, what do you mean broken glass? And he went, literally broken glass, as in some of it's still got Budweiser printed on it. And at that point, the world stopped.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely wow.
And I just want to roll back a little bit. So literally, you've taken every penny that you had yourself, but you've also borrowed a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
From, I'm going to stick with your term, business people.
Correct.
To the tune of like £1 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you've just bought a few broken Budweiser bottles.
Yeah. That's the strength of it. And so at that point, I could feel the sweat running down the back of my neck, to be honest, at that point. The girls that were in the office working at the time. I just went, you just need to get out. Just go. Don't care where you go. Just get out. And by the time the second one of those walked out the door, I was already being sick in the bin behind it, because it was the first time in my cockiness that I had suddenly got the dawning realisation of what this actually could mean. Not only could it mean the end of my business, it could actually mean the end of my ability to walk on the face of the planet. And that suddenly became crashingly apparent to me.
So how do you deal with that?
Well, it was really difficult, because I went from having all the friends in the world and all of the allies in the world to suddenly realising I had nobody, because when we were talking earlier, you used the phraseology talking about rats off the sinking ship, and that's what it was. Everybody that I knew, people I thought were close to me, people I thought would be supportive, suddenly just ran for the hills. Literally, you couldn't get phone calls, wouldn't get answered, people wouldn't talk to you. And some support came from places I wasn't expecting it to come through, and people tried to pass sort of bits of work to me where I could earn some money and try and make amends with people. But one of the things that I realised at that point is that if I just sat quietly in a corner hoping that this was going to go away, is that might mean I might end up planted quietly in a corner and just disappear. So what I had to do was to, again, going with what one of the things that I can do, and I do quite well, is communicate with people. And one of the things that in entrepreneurialism across the board I talk about is learning how to communicate. And so I had to basically go cap in hand to all the wrong types of people, and explain how I was going to fix things. And it was not a quick process. It wasn't something that I can get this sorted out in a week. This was something that took a long time, and had very real repercussions on my life and how I had to live it. And there were certain nasty events that forced me to having to go and do different bits and pieces. I had to relocate for a little while I was creating that space to be able to make opportunities, to be able to redress the balance with people. So in as much as I had to make communication and I had to talk to people, it's very easy when you find yourself under pressure that it can become all-consuming unless you can distance yourself from it. And when you're getting relentless phone calls, people driving past your house at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, turning up outside your kid's school, that's a difficult position to find yourself in. So you have to create a bit of distance to be able to go away, come up with the plan that you can then come back and act on.
One of the things I saw you speak about is tackling this head on, going to meet somebody to talk it through. Now, we've had a guest here in the past who had a challenge in his business where literally he couldn't pay the bills, so he made the phone calls to this. Now, this is on a different level in the sense that this is life, but just to paint a picture in absolute clarity, one of those meetings I already talk about, was it effectively in a crib?
It was, yeah.
Tell us that experience.
So yeah, we basically were going to have a meeting with
one of your funders.
Well, yeah, some people that had funds into us. I would stress with these guys that they were legitimate guys who had put money into the venture, but nonetheless, when you're talking about these types of amounts of money, everybody is an issue. And so as we were driving up to the meeting, I was driving up with one of the guys who was involved in my business at the time, and he was saying, I said to him, well, I think it should be okay. I said, but if the meeting takes less than 10 minutes, we're in dire trouble. If it takes half an hour and onwards, it may be that that we'll be okay. And he said, so just to clarify, he said, if this meeting takes less than 10 minutes, is it a case that we're driving straight to the airport and leaving? I said, yeah, that's a pretty fair assumption. And I had my passport in my jacket. So we drove up to the meeting, and we went into the building to have the meeting, which was in a converted chapel. So when I went in there, I was met by the young lady. Said, "Oh yeah, I need to take you downstairs and have a seat, and the guys will be down in a minute." And when she took me down and sat me downstairs, it was in the crypt of the building, complete with headstones and stuff down the side of the wall. And they kept me waiting down there for, it was maybe like 2 or 3 minutes, but it felt significantly longer when I was sat there. That was quite a concerning time.
Yeah. But you chose to address each of the funders. I'm going to keep using that term. In this venture, and put proposals to them on how you were going to get their money back. Yeah,
nobody sets out to fail in business. You never set out to get it wrong, but it's inevitable at some point you will make a mistake. There's no such thing as a perfect business. And so, it had gone wrong. And I've had businesses later that have gone wrong. But the main thing being that, as you communicate with people, you work, you cooperate, you find ways and means of addressing situations with them. And the outcome of that then generally is good for all people, because it shows a willingness from your side to honour commitments that you've made, and people that you work with generally want to get their money back. At the end of the day, I sort of laughingly joke about it, but when you have problems in your business, if you owe money to the bank or you owe money to the tax man, things that seem insurmountable at the time, you have to try and put that in the context that these guys are not gonna, your accountant is not going to turn up round your house at 3 o'clock in the morning and sit on the end of your bed and threaten to shoot you. Whereas the guys that were talking to me might well have done that at some point. It sort of quantifies for me that actually when you sit there and you think things are bad, and you think things can't get any worse, that everybody you're going to meet on your journey will work with you if it means recovering their own interests. And I think that was the big takeaway that I learned, is actually that, no matter how bad you think it is, if you can communicate, you can make a plan, if you can work with people and it's in their interests, then it's never as bad as you actually really believe it is.
Right. And you obviously got through that, and I dealt with that situation, and you're still here, we're talking.
I'm not telling you where I live though.
So how did you move forward from that point?
Well, from that point, obviously, it was a really great meeting. So the guys that I met with, in a very short space of time, turned around and said to me, "Okay, thanks for recognising the problem. We can see what happened. We can see that there's a story here. It wasn't your fault what had happened. So we would like to work with you, and we think there's a way that we can utilise the skills that you've got and our business, and we will fund some operations for you, fund some business, and you just come back to us with a plan and let us know what that's going to be, and we will support those endeavours, and you can earn money out of it, and you can earn money back for us at the same time." And so that then set me off onto my next sort of journeys, and the guys that I now find myself in now, where I'm still involved in trading and commodities, albeit not diamonds anymore, but I'm still involved in that industry, and various other supporting industries within business and coaching and mentoring. So it really was a pivot point for me of that. When you get as low as you ever can, and when you get to a point where everything that ever mattered to you has been completely stripped away from you, and I do mean everything, to the point that going for a cup of coffee at the Wimpy would have been a luxury if you could afford it. it was hard, and had to become something where I reinvented into something else completely different, in order to give me a chance to repair past damages and also to build something new for the future, and rekindle relationships that had been damaged by my earlier exploits.
Yes. So how long did that take to do all that rebuilding?
That was, as I said, it was not a quick period of time. That's a journey that's evolved over a period of years for that to happen, and to an extent is still happening, and still moving forward. There are still people that were involved in these exploits that were damaged by those exploits, and their life was damaged as a result of it. So it's still an ongoing process of making amends with people even today. But it's now in a situation that's managed and controllable, and it's a process of rebuilding for everybody. So I think the main thing, as I said to you from my early experiences in business, is about that consistency and showing up and the reliability and being accountable and being there. And so it's an ongoing process. It's not something that's gone away overnight. These are things that are still very real and sit in the background of things that I do today.
Yeah. Whilst we've been chatting, at each point you've sort of been great in highlighting sort of some of the key sort of what that experience picked up. If you was to pull together that whole journey that you've been on and pick up like 3 key things that have put you in the best stead and key takeaways from your whole experience in your life and business, what would they be?
I think it's quite difficult to summarise sort of 30 plus years, but I think the real takeaways for me, one of the most important things is about who you put round you. We've talked about the fake friends and the people turning up who do half a job around you. One of the things that I've found is I am a real risk taker, and even to this day I will take risks that most people will think unreasonable. And one of the things that I learned was to put people around me who can complement my skills, but will also challenge me and will also go, perhaps we should take a step back here. So I think it's important to carefully select who you have around you, and particularly in a business context. You don't want loads of people who are the same as you, because they will all be charging at the same cliff you are, and you actually want one of those guys to turn around and go, whoa, just stop, guys, before we all go off of it. So be mindful of who you put around you. I would also say learn and get really comfortable with the word no. No, I'm not going to do it. No, I can't meet the deadline. No, that's not possible for me. As entrepreneurs, it's very easy to find ourselves just constantly going, yeah, of course I will. Of course I will. Yeah, of course. It's your big client. He's on the phone. He wants you to push a boundary to get something back for him on time. You feel compelled to say yes. I would say get comfortable with saying no. And I would say that's especially important in protecting your own mental well-being. If you're used to going to the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning, you don't start work till 8, you don't start agreeing you're going to take a client call at 7. You just don't do it. So get really comfortable with saying no. That would be my next sort of big takeaway, really. And lastly, I would say be consistent. Keep consistent, turn up, show up, be accountable, be focused, be persistent. If you've got your ideas, set your plans, set your goals, set your course, stay on it.
So what does the future look like for Geoff?
Well, hopefully rosy, Richard, to be honest with you. I've put quite a lot of time and hard work into things now, so I'm hoping to get some of the cream off the top of the bowl now. So I'm very much now focused on my other businesses, my commodity trading, where I'm hoping to move more into a role of a shareholder and move away from the day-to-day work, so that I can concentrate more on the keynote speaking and delivering messages to business, as well as sitting alongside and running my online business consulting platform. So I'm looking forward to sort of stepping away from the hands-on operations of stuff and getting more involved with talking to entrepreneurs, giving a bit of my message, seeing if what I can offer can help develop other people, and perhaps help them avoid some of the pitfalls that I might have strayed down in the past.
I can see a lot of lessons there that so many people can pick up from. There's so much that's pick up from there. But what is your real purpose? And to quote like the name of the podcast, really, your drive. What drives you to keep going, even when you're at that low and everything's gone, as you said, and you've got people sat at the edge of your bed and things like that happening? Well, actually, I can probably imagine what the drive there is.
Fear and abject terror.
What is your what drives you to continue to want to run your own business and do what you continue to do?
I think that's a really good question, and actually quite difficult to answer, because there are certainly times during that journey where you start going, is this really worth it? Is it worth it? Is it worth the sleepless nights? Is it worth the stress? Is it worth the toll it's taken on your family, the relationships, everything else? And sometimes, when you sit there at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, the answer to that question is no. But then when you had a chance to sit back and reflect and look at it again, I think the thing that really drives me is that I like to achieve things that people have thought that can't be done. I like to challenge the ability to get things done. I like to prove new routes of getting things done. And as I said earlier, sometimes for me, the whole thing of business is the thrill of the chase. I enjoy going and getting the deals done. I enjoy that adrenaline of doing something new, of challenging myself. And I think really the thing that keeps me on it is that I just love the challenge. I like to be pushed. I like to find myself in situations that require me to think, what's the best route for me to get out of this? What's the best way for me to deliver a result? And in more recent years, it's become more about how can I deliver a result that not only benefits me, but benefits people around me, and that how can I drive people to also benefit from some of the decisions that I've made. So I think, I started out on my business career, I was about as selfish as they came. I was very self-serving. I wanted to know what was in it for me. And I think over the years that's changed, and it's become more about how can I support people and businesses around me to also grow, to enable me to grow. And that's how my legacy, if you like, is where I'm looking to take people on the journey to elevate them, but at the same time elevate myself.
I resonate with that so much. I think so many people, especially if they've been running their own business for quite a few years, their motivations and their drive changes and evolves as that person changes and evolves. Mine started to provide so much for myself and family, and now exactly with yourself, it's more about how I can elevate those around me, less about myself. As long as my mortgage is paid, I'm happy.
Yeah.
It's how can I bring everybody else up?
Yeah, I think it's the thing is as you go, when you start out, you want all of the trappings. You want the cars, you want the big houses, you want the big bank account, you want the 5 or 6 holidays a year. And I think, while all of those things are nice to have, and they are nice to have, nobody's going to say, we don't want a nice car, but they become less important. You get in your car, by the time you've driven it 5 or 6 times, it's just a car. It gets you from A to B. It doesn't serve any more purpose than that. And if you can bring people up around you, that is something that will keep giving, because it gives to their family, it gives to their friends, it brings more on. And one of the things that we set out on the programs that I'm involved with now, part of the marketing is to positively affect the lives of 1 billion people. And that's positively affect. So that's not just about money. That's about changing your life experience. And I think that's become more where my focus is going in the business that I'm now pursuing, is leveling people up, bringing them up, supporting them, letting them put smiles on people's faces. Because at the end of the day, who wants to be miserable?
And Geoff, if somebody wanted to find out a bit more about the Diamond Geezer and what you can do for them, how do they find that?
Well, if they want to have a look, you will find me on Facebook, just as Geoff Smith. You'll find me on there with a picture of my ugly mug next to it. You'll find me on Instagram, Geoff Smith 316. You'll find me there. And if you want to go and have a look at the website to find out a bit more about what we do for businesses, then you can find me on gsfastgrowth.com.
Brilliantly. We'll add those links into the Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen and watch this podcast. So anybody listening or watching, you'll be able to see those links in the comments or description for this now. It is an amazing story. I knew it would be. Jacob and I were absolutely in awe when we saw you first telling that on stage. Thank you for sharing. It's been brilliant.
Thank you for having me. It's been really good. Really enjoyed it.
I hope you enjoyed this interview. Please remember to hit follow on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. It really helps the algorithm and push this podcast up through the rankings. And also leave some feedback. I look forward to bringing you the next episode of Drive. Until next time, this is Drive, the small business podcast from UKBF.